You change your product again because if you still stick with one type of technology, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the new things that get offered in the new technologies. If you want to avoid people playing off each other to get promoted or whatever else, you have to bring in mechanisms to change it. So the strategy is to have people who are outsourced to come and work alongside us, because then they have the benefit of the companies providing them. The economy, the global labour market, is now benefiting from increased awareness and education and exposure to software development and IT.
Hi everybody, welcome to the Devico Breakfast Bar. Here we speak with different people involved in the business landscape, share their expertise, delve into the latest tech trends, and explore the ins and outs of IT outsourcing. I'm Oleg Sadikov, and today I'm excited to have Bridget Harris, co-founder at YouCanBookMe. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss new episodes. Hi Bridget, and thanks for joining me today.
Hi Oleg, how are you doing?
Doing great. Let's start our podcast with a little blitz. I start a sentence and you continue. Entrepreneurship gave me
freedom.
Entrepreneurship deprived me.
Security.
My main superpower is
decision making.
My main weakness is
probably impulsiveness. I talk too much.
When I'm afraid, I
get defensive.
Sounds good.
I didn't realize this was going to be a therapy session.
No, it's just 5 questions. I don't tell anyone about this blitz, so it should be kind of surprise. I think it's more exciting.
Good.
Going this way. What motivated you to create a calendar-based scheduling tool? What's their specific problem or gap in the market you identified early on?
We were motivated to build a product that we could promote over the cloud, that we could do a cloud-based web application. That was the original point, and YouCanBookMe was in a long line of products that we had built. But YouCanBookMe itself was born out of a pivot of another scheduling tool that we had already built called When is Good. And so in a way, the business plan and the product market fit and the obvious choice to do it was born out of how quickly and how enthusiastically people were trying to use When is Good as a booking tool, and it seemed to us something sensible that we should build for them instead.
Sounds good. You rebuilt the product several times. Can you talk about the process and mindset behind these rebuilds? What were the key learnings?
Okay, really good question. The first version of YouCanBookMe was built in 2011. Now, for anybody listening who is younger than the age of 40, 2011 starts to become a bit of a stretch to remember, especially in technology terms. If you think that you're going to build a product or a software engineering stack and it will never change, then you are mistaken. It would be naive. So whatever you've built in 2011 needs to be pulled down and rebuilt in 2014, which needs to be pulled down and rebuilt in 2017. And so on. And I think that the original MVP was sitting on entirely different infrastructure. We changed our infrastructure 2 or 3 times from the early days, principally and most significantly from Rackspace to AWS. So we moved to the cloud in about 2018, something like that. So you've got all your engineering and infrastructure upgrades that need to happen, and that's partly to take advantage of available technology. So when we started, AWS and cloud hosting wasn't available. I know it's all quite controversial as a topic. People like the idea of going back to boxes, and that's fine. Do whatever you want to do, but we started off with boxes and then we moved to Rackspace and then we moved to AWS. I don't think we're going to go back. So that inevitably forces change. You start off with developers. It's the Conway's Law theory. I don't know if you're familiar with that, Oleg, but Conway's Law in software development suggests that you end up with applications and architecture which is driven by the technology interests of the developer themselves. So in our case, our CTO and my co-founder Keith he's a Java developer, he's a back-end server-side developer, so our entire stack was server-side. Everything was being served through JSPs, Java server pages. And of course, halfway through the development of YouCanBook, we realized we should have brought a lot more front-end client-side applications in, like JavaScript and now React. And so you change your product again because if you still stick with one type of technology, you're not going to be able to take advantage of the new things that get offered in the new technologies. Impacts everything else, like who do you hire? So were we only going to be able to hire Java developers from then on? Or how are we going to broaden our team? Or how are we going to scale up our architecture so we could have more people working on different parts of the stack at the same time and move forward together? We had to move away from quite a monolithic server-side application and change it. So these things push forward change anyway, and you just have to get used to that. That's completely normal. If you tell me that, show me a software company that hasn't done some sort of refactoring and change every 2 or 3 years, I just won't believe you otherwise. And so for us, we've just got very used to it. And then you get the business side of it. So it takes a long time for companies to really get into their stride about their business model, about their pricing, about their ICPs, their ideal customer profiles, their go-to-market, and that all of that demands change. So we just happen to be we're 13 years old now for YouCanBookMe. We've been building products for 20 years. So for us, change is normal.
Amazing. 20 years.
Our first product was 2003, Tickboxer. It was a survey building tool.
It was even before Facebook.
Yes, it was. But we weren't American, nor were we VC backed, nor did we know really what we were doing. But in terms of the experience of building all those products, it led us to really understanding what we wanted ourselves as founders and as entrepreneurs, and how we wanted to serve customers and what we wanted to do. So I'm very happy that we're not Facebook.
You bootstrapped the company to 5 million ARR. What were some of the key strategies or decisions, as you wish, that contributed to your success without external funding?
Bootstrapping is not for everybody. It depends on what kind of product you're building and the business model that you have and the kind of risk that you want to take on. So I think the key defining feature of me and Keith was that we were happy to take on 100% of the risk of the venture not working. And that's not available to some people in their 20s who want to work on a startup. They don't have any other alternative source of income. They don't necessarily have any job security or housing security. They raise money from investors because then they get paid and they can pay their rent. And then they can work on their idea, and they sacrifice future wealth by selling equity at the start. And that makes sense. In the case of me and Keith, we were in our late 30s when we really went all in on YouCanBookMe. So to bootstrap it for us, we already had a much more mature amount of financial security, and we had a very healthy risk appetite for what we were doing. And that's because it depends on your co-founder. So me and Keith were a partnership. We're married. We're a husband and wife team. So he could do all of the engineering and the product, and I could do all of the business and the operations. So between the two of us, we could manage an awful lot of what was required without personally paying us. YouCanBookMe to pay us anything for a while because we could manage our finances with external work. He was still doing contracting, I was still doing contracting. So it's partly about opportunity and risk appetite for people, and that's how we did it. And then the other thing is it's sacrificing instant success for longer term growth. We actually got very fast growth in the first few years, but it took us a long time to build up to that $1 million. And we basically hit profitability at around the same point we hit £1 million. So our first profitable year was 2016 to 2017. So we've been going for 5 years, and we got to $1 million within that 5 years, and we were also profitable. And then as soon as we started to make money, and we grew fast from then on, as soon as you start to make money, if you think of me and Keith as the investors in our own business, we could take effectively wealth out of the business through dividends and profit over that period of time that was equivalent to what would have happened if we had sold the company to investors and got shares back or whatever it is. Like at the end of the day, you are running a company to make money. And we started to make money in 2016, 2017. So we had no incentive at that point to raise outside funding because we're making our own money. So, we were happy.
You touched on one part of equation, risk. What about being ahead of competitors? Didn't you think back in the days that funding will help you just to speed up things and be the first one, or at least be ahead of the competitors? With risk tolerance, I understand. But the other part of the equation, there are quite a few of them.
Let me think about this, because Calendly came on the scene around 2013, 2014. So Calendly posed that existential competitive threat that you're talking about. So YouCanBookMe was the first calendar-based booking tool. There wasn't anything like YouCanBookMe in 2011, 2012. We were the first booking tool that just integrated directly with a calendar. Now it's completely normal and commonplace, but then it was unusual. The other competitors they all had their custom-built calendars that they worked with. Now, if you want to look at it philosophically, you could say that we risked and lost being the first mover in that market because we lost out to Calendly, because we were first and we had the better tool, but because we didn't have the investment that Calendly had, we didn't grow as fast as Calendly, and Calendly have obviously eaten the world now with what they do. But you really also have to ask me, do I want to be Taupe and the CEO of a multi-billion-pound software company now, owing giving VCs half a billion quid in investment and running a company of 600, 700 people, however many people are at Calendly? And the answer is categorically not. Or I'd have had to move to America to do that, or I've had to have had a completely different life. So the risk of not being Calendly has actually been mitigated by the risk of me ruining my life. So I haven't ruined my life and I'm quite happy. But I have a $5 million business, not $5 billion business. So it's about contentment, if you like, about what you want. We could have risked not being Calendly, not being YouCanBookMe. We had already experienced that. So we'd already built lots of different tools that did lots of jobs that didn't make any money. So we knew what it was like to have tools that didn't make any money, and we wanted to do it on our own terms. So I didn't see at the time that there was going to be a big advantage of investors giving us money, and we did talk to a few of them, so that I had more money to spend on my own inexperience. So what I've said many times is I'd rather have made £1 million slowly than lose £1 million fast. So what I saw at the time was people could give me £1 million to hire more people and build up the company. And maybe we could have done that. But I should say with Tope, who is the CEO and founder of Calendly, he was a second-time entrepreneur. He'd already done it first. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he's very impressive. Whereas I'd never run a company before, and never hired people before, and never built a software company before. So if I'd taken on money at that time, it's very likely that I would have just blown the cash and we wouldn't have got any further down the project. So we did it the hard way. But there's no easy way to run a company. There's no easy shortcut.
What are some of current trends in scheduling and productivity tools industry that excite you?
Oh, AI is obviously a big one. And how do you make the whole thing easier and more predictive? And AI has got the capacity to predict when people should be meeting. So I think it's going to make a big impact into how we do our jobs, how our tools evolve. I personally think scheduling is a nice problem because I've been saying for years you need to fall in love with the problem, not the solution. And the reason for that is because you can get stuck in your ways if you just build the solution. You just think the solution, whatever it is you can get obsessed about. But you can go down a rabbit hole. Whereas if you focus on the problem, you can always stay relevant to the problem that you're trying to solve. And in this case, our problem is trying to find a time for people to meet. And that was a problem before the internet. It's been a problem continuously whilst we've had the internet. It'll be a problem when we use AI to solve it. It's not going to ever not be a problem. There might be multiple solutions that change, but the problem is always going to be there. When are we going to meet? You and I had to figure out when we were going to do this recording and this interview. That's always going to be the case. There's no situation where that problem is going to go away. And I think that as a problem makes it very interesting because it's always evolving as a result. The solutions are always evolving, and that's what we've tried to do with our tool.
YouCanBookMe has been removed from day one. What have been the advantages and challenges of leading a fully remote international team?
None. It's perfect.
Okay. Short answer.
Especially when you get a 2-year pandemic, you don't miss a beat. We just did not know what all the fuss was about. I think it's horses for courses, to be honest, Oleg. I think some people love an office. They love a Friday afternoon cake thing and all the culture that happens around offices and collaboration, and you can have remote companies, and really it's not right or wrong, but what you can't have is somebody who loves working remote and getting them to come into an office every day, because they won't be motivated. And you can't have people who love offices working remote because they get isolated and frustrated. So your only real issue is to make sure that you hire the right kind of people.
How do you maintain a strong company culture and ensure effective communication across the dispersed team?
Well, the first thing is you can't neglect it or ignore it. You can't just set it and forget it. Culture is a living thing. So if you don't actively remind everybody what the culture of the company is, their own culture will form. So if you want to avoid, office politics, backstabbing, gossiping, if you want to avoid people playing off each other to get promoted or whatever else, you have to bring in mechanisms to change it. So for example, in our company, we have had for many years a transparent salary system. Everybody knows what the salary rates are. We have a system where all of our meetings are recorded, not so that there's a big brother snoop going on. It's just it means that everybody knows that meetings are available and transparent for decision making and referring back to later, which is a key thing about remote working. We get together more than once a year, like sometimes in smaller batches and sometimes as a whole company. So just in the summer we all got together and met up in Scotland, but we've done France and Costa Rica and the Dominican Republic and Spain, Portugal. So regular meetups helps reinforce social bonds, because you do need social bonds between people. And I think you just just have to be really clear about the cultural norms, rituals and practices which make sense for you inside an organisation. So that is very much led by me and Keith as co-founders, and then my management team talk about it a lot, about what kind of, is there a YouCanBookMe way? What kind of things do we do? What's the YouCanBookMe way of doing things? And we get it wrong. We don't sometimes, as I said, you have to course correct often inside culture so that you don't end up with behaviours that you hadn't seen that start to emerge. Because I mean, we're about 25, 30 people who work in YouCanBookMe one way or another. That's even that is a lot of people remote for any one of us to personally know. Do they know what the YouCanBookMe way is? So we have our values printed on posters and set up in the office, and all of our merchandise refers to our values, and we talk about them and we try to reinforce them. So it's just an active job, and we have an operations team that's also keen to not just reinforce cultural values but also organise social events and keep in touch with people and keep communication open across different teams and colleagues. You just have to be on it. It's part of the job.
IT outsourcing is a major trend in the tech industry. What are your thoughts on the advantages and disadvantages of outsourcing tech functions?
I think it's got a bad press from people who assume you outsource to reduce costs. And even if that might be part of the dimension to it, because you have got an opportunity to employ people in other countries that don't charge as much, their standard cost of living isn't high. I think I would only outsource strategically, and that's what we do inside YouCanBookMe. So we have elements of outsourced web development, QA, and customer support, and finance actually, if you include finance. And it's strategic, which means that I'm not outsourcing customer support because I can't afford an expensive in-house team. We used to have in-house people doing our customer support. It didn't work. And it didn't work because, similar to QA, you have people who need to do manual work and it's repetitive and it doesn't change because tier 1 tickets or testing applications, it's the same every day. And for a very small company, it's very hard to maintain career progression for people in those roles. So the strategy is to have people who are outsourced to come and work alongside us, because then they have the benefit of the companies providing them, and they might be working with YouCanBookMe for a couple of years and then they can move on and do something else inside their career and they can get developed elsewhere, because we as a company can't do as much of that. Or in the case of support, particularly, we used to have a third-party support partner, but now we just simply hire freelancers, because the nature of the game in terms of tier 1 support tickets and AI support bots and agents and all the rest of it is you're looking for people who are very motivated to do well in their own area and do better. And so we can have more of them than we would have been able to afford through either a formal partner or in-house as employed. So I basically think it's a good idea. I've talked about it at conferences, depending on your strategies around hiring people. I personally don't think it's a great long-term strategy to have lots of freelancers scattered around the place working for you in your company where they're not outsourced and they're not employed. My perfect model is people who are employed, but they come from a third-party firm that we then hire. It's like a partnership between the two companies. And we've been doing that with 2 different companies for a long time now, one in QA and one for web development. And it works very well.
How do you see the role of IT outsourcing evolving in the context of your industry's future?
Oh, I think that there's a huge opportunity, because going back to the original point, it is actually about costs. I think the economy, the actual labour market, the global labour market is now benefiting from increased awareness and education and exposure to software development and IT. So it means that people in countries all around the world, the Philippines and Sri Lanka and India and obviously a lot of the countries in Eastern Europe that provide so many software developers, very highly trained, experienced software developers. Southern Africa, you're getting African hubs now in Kenya and in other places, South Africa, where you're getting highly trained, very skilled developers and engineers who can work for global software companies. And if they do that via third-party outsourced partnerships, fine, because the days that everybody has to crowd into that one small little strip in San Francisco and everybody is paying $3,000 a month rent to basically San Francisco landlords, if you think about the fact that San Francisco pay rates for software companies are always being jacked up by San Francisco housing costs. So why the global economy on software companies relying on San Francisco housing costs is beyond me. So I am very much in favor of a global economy for what is actually global software.
Are there specific regions or countries that you find particularly promising for tech talent?
I think Kenya. I think a lot of really interesting things are coming out of Southern Africa, and I think that it's basically Southern Africa's, I'm not discounting North Africa, but it's just that Sub-Saharan Africa has for a generation been associated with international development, but now you've got Nigeria and Kenya and South Africa in particular are countries that their economies are growing so fast, their populations are growing so fast, and they're coming out with some incredibly good developers.
As we wrap up our conversation, what advice would you give to business leaders considering IT outsourcing as the part of their growth strategy?
I think that they should do what we did, naturally, which is you talk to... What we did was we contacted about 30 or 40... This is what we did for QA. We contacted about 30 or 40 companies who were all offering outsourced QA services. And we got them...
You didn't contact us?
No, I don't think we did. I'm sorry. We might have done. I can check. And we basically had a requirements questionnaire. And so it was things like, where are your agents? Where are your developers? Are they employed? What, QA testing software do they use? That kind of thing. Rates of pay as well, that kind of thing. And then got them to all fill it out. And then we selected a short list of about 10 or maybe less than that, where we then did another kind of round. It was almost like we treated it like a hiring process, like a recruitment process. And at each stage, we were treating the outsourced partners as if, and it's true, they're going to come to work for us. So they're going to provide us with people. So we wanted to make sure that we were working with companies that aligned with how we were going to work. They were going to hire people that were going to work well with our team, because we needed a really embedded team. And so we ended up then having about 3 people on the shortlist who we then scored, like we interviewed them, we had like a call. And so I think that what we did was, and I don't know if you want to hear this or not, Oleg, but we disrupted the sales process. So rather than just getting everybody to send us their sales decks, you would end up having sales calls with providers where it all sounds identical, and how can you possibly tell the difference? So we took control of the process, and we basically went proactively out to everybody and said, you answer our questions. Now we're going to interview you, and we're going to score you against our criteria, and then we're going to decide. And so in the end, we decided with a QA, we went for a partner who wasn't in any way the cheapest. We had loads more cheaper offers on the table, but it was because of the way that they aligned their QA philosophy alongside ours, and that's why we chose them.
Thank you, Bridget. It was very nice conversation. I really enjoyed your insights, thoughts, your experience, and it will be definitely useful for my auditor.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me on the show. I really appreciate it.
If you enjoy our discussion and want to stay updated on future episodes, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you will not miss out on the latest insights and conversations from the Devico Breakfast Bar. See you in the next episode.